Ever wish there was like a guidebook for building stronger relationships? Well, the U.S. Navy actually has one.
Oh, wow.
And it's not even just for like couples or anything.
Interesting.
Today, we're going to be diving deep into this fascinating document called the Voyage to Relationship Literacy.
Okay.
And it basically lays out this really ambitious program that the Navy's using to try and improve relationships.
Okay.
At all levels of their organization.
Interesting. So like throughout the ranks and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Across the board.
That's a bold move to tackle this head on like that.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about a cultural shift within a massive institution.
Right.
It's
not easy.
Not easy at all.
No. And I think what's really interesting about it is that it's not just like some feel-good initiative. This program was born out of some pretty stark realities that the Navy's facing.
Absolutely. The document kind of acknowledges those challenges right up front. You know, sexual harassment, abuse, even instances of rape within the ranks.
It's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like a direct response to those issues.
Right.
And I think the aim is to really like prevent future harm, create a more positive environment for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. For everyone serving.
So like, how do you even begin to tackle something that's so complex?
Right.
Like, where does the Navy even start with something like this?
Well, the foundation, according to them, is self-awareness.
Okay.
Chapter 1 of the document dives deep into the idea of self-identity. And they're emphasizing that understanding yourself is absolutely crucial for understanding others.
Just like that saying, right? You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they even go beyond
just
like a surface level understanding of yourself. They actually break down identity into all these different threads.
Okay.
Like ethnicity, nationality, sexuality, religion, and more.
Gotcha.
It's about recognizing and appreciating those differences in ourselves so we can be more open and understanding of others.
Makes sense. So it's interesting, though, because like the military is often seen as like this very uniform hierarchical structure.
Yes.
How does this focus on individual identity even fit into that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the document actually addresses that directly.
Oh, okay.
They argue that acknowledging and valuing these individual differences actually strengthens the Navy as a whole.
Oh, interesting.
So when people feel seen and respected for who they are, it fosters this sense of belonging, right? And then it creates stronger bonds within teams.
So it's not about erasing those differences to fit in.
Right.
It's about leveraging those unique perspectives to actually work better together.
Exactly. And they emphasize that this leads to greater empathy too, which is of course crucial for any healthy relationship, whether it's with your shipmate or your commanding officer.
So this is where I think the Navy's approach gets really compelling.
Okay.
Because they don't shy away from the tough stuff.
Right.
Chapter 2 dives headfirst into this whole spectrum of abuse.
Yeah, and they're not just talking about physical abuse.
Right.
They lay out all the forms it can take.
Okay.
Verbal, sexual, mental, emotional, even financial abuse.
Wow.
They get really granular with it.
Yeah, I was struck by some of the examples they give, like under the verbal abuse section. They were talking about how like a constant barrage of insults can be just as damaging as physical blows.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's a powerful way to illustrate that abuse isn't always like visible. Right. It can be subtle, insidious even.
Yeah.
But the impact is undeniable.
So it's like they've laid out this problem, right? This gap between the Navy's ideals and the reality of some of these like harmful behaviors. So what's their proposed solution?
In a word, emotional intelligence.
Okay.
That's the focus of Chapter 3.
Okay.
And it's really the cornerstone of this entire program.
Okay, so break that down for me a little bit.
Okay.
What does emotional intelligence actually look like in this context?
So it's about being able to understand and manage your own emotions, but just as importantly, recognizing those emotions in others.
Yeah. Almost like having a set of tools that helps you navigate all the complexities of human interaction.
Yes.
So not just reacting impulsively to things, but taking a step back, assessing the situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The program wants to equip sailors with specific skills.
Okay.
Like managing anger,
Okay.
coping with stress, and expressing affection appropriately.
Interesting.
These are all skills that are valuable in any relationship.
Sure.
But especially critical in the high-stakes environment of the Navy.
So can you give me like a concrete example
Sure.
of how this might play out?
Absolutely. Let's say you're on a submarine.
Okay.
Tensions are high, and you have a disagreement with a shipmate.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of letting your anger control the situation,
Right.
you can use these emotional intelligence techniques to de-escalate, to communicate clearly,
Okay.
and then to find a resolution.
So it's like having a toolkit, right?
Yes.
To navigate those inevitable, difficult moments that come up in any relationship.
Right.
But especially, I imagine, when you're in those close quarters, under pressure, with lives potentially on the line.
Right, exactly. And it's not about erasing emotions.
Right.
It's about harnessing them
Yeah.
to build those stronger connections and ultimately a stronger Navy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've talked about emotional intelligence, this idea of like recognizing your own emotions,
All right.
managing them,
Yeah.
seeing how they play out in other people. But how does that translate into like concrete action?
Right.
How do they take those principles and turn them into something tangible?
Yeah.
We're going to dive into it in the next part of this deep dive.
Right.
Okay. So we're back.
Yes.
Diving deeper into the U.S. Navy's relationship literacy program. In the last part, we talked about emotional intelligence.
Right.
And how it's kind of like the bedrock of this whole thing.
Yeah. And one of the key aspects of emotional intelligence that they highlight is managing anger.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a pretty universal emotion. But I imagine, especially in a high-pressure environment like the Navy,
Right.
knowing how to handle anger effectively could literally be like the difference between life and death.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The program doesn't necessarily see anger as inherently bad, though.
Okay.
It recognizes that it's a natural human emotion that can even be a source of energy and motivation.
Yeah, for sure.
But the key, of course, is learning how to channel it in a constructive way.
So how do they approach that? How do they teach sailors to manage their anger?
Well, it all starts with self-awareness, right?
Okay.
The first step is recognizing your own personal anger triggers.
So what sets you off?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once you understand that,
Okay.
you can start to develop coping mechanisms for those specific situations.
What might some of those coping mechanisms look like in a Navy context?
They give some really practical examples in the guidebook.
Okay.
One of the simplest but most effective strategies is just the power of taking a pause.
Oh, interesting. So not reacting immediately.
Right.
Giving yourself a minute to cool down.
Exactly. Even just a few seconds to like take a breath can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
It allows you to break that automatic fight or flight response.
Right.
And choose a more thoughtful course of action.
You know, that makes me think about the importance of clear communication too, especially in the Navy, where orders are given and followed with such precision. Being able to articulate your needs and feelings in a calm and assertive way seems really essential.
Absolutely. And the program emphasizes that communication isn't just about speaking clearly.
Okay.
It's also about active listening.
Yeah, right.
Really hearing and understanding what the other person is saying, even if you don't agree with them.
Yeah, so much of this sounds like it boils down to self-regulation.
Yes.
Which is a hard skill to master, even in the best of circumstances.
Right.
But I imagine it's even more challenging in like a military setting.
Right.
Where you have this very strict hierarchy.
Yeah.
And a lot of pressure to conform.
You're right. It's definitely not easy.
Right.
And the guidebook acknowledges those challenges head on. They talk about how the traditional culture of the Navy, with its emphasis on stoicism and obedience, can sometimes make it difficult for people to express their emotions or ask for help.
So how does the program address that?
Well, one way is through leadership training.
All right.
They're specifically working to train leaders at all levels to recognize the importance of emotional intelligence and to model those behaviors themselves.
So it's about creating a culture where it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, exactly. Even in a high-pressure environment, it's about recognizing that taking care of your mental and emotional well-being is not a weakness. It's actually essential for individual and collective success.
Okay, now another topic the program dives into is stress management.
And that's a big one. I mean, let's face it, the Navy is an incredibly demanding environment. Sailors are often away from their families for long periods of time. Working long hours in close quarters. Facing dangerous situations like
Yeah.
Stress is an unavoidable part of the job.
I would imagine that chronic stress could take a real toll on someone's mental and physical health.
Absolutely.
Which ultimately could even impact their ability to perform their duties effectively.
Absolutely. And that's why the program dedicates a significant portion of the guidebook to stress management techniques.
So what are some of the specific strategies that they recommend?
They cover a pretty wide range,
Sure.
from mindfulness and relaxation techniques to physical exercise and getting enough sleep.
So like the basics.
Yeah, they really emphasize the importance of finding healthy outlets for stress and developing a routine that prioritizes self-care.
It's interesting. It sounds like they're really trying to shift the culture away from this idea that toughness means suppressing your emotions.
Right.
Pushing through no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're promoting a more holistic view of resilience. One that recognizes the importance of mental and emotional well-being alongside physical strength.
Okay, so we've talked about managing anger, coping with stress. What other elements of emotional intelligence does the program focus on?
Well, one that often gets overlooked, especially in a military context, is affection.
Affection.
Yeah.
That seems a bit counterintuitive for a branch of the armed forces.
It might seem that way at first.
Yeah.
But the program makes a really compelling case for why affection is actually essential for building strong teams and a cohesive unit.
I'm intrigued. What's their reasoning?
So they argue that expressing affection appropriately, whether it's through words of affirmation, acts of service, or simply showing genuine care and concern for your shipmates, can have a profound impact on morale and teamwork.
So creating a more supportive and empathetic environment.
Right.
Which in turn makes people more willing to go the extra mile for each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They even draw a connection between affection and the Navy's core values of honor, courage, and commitment.
Interesting.
They argue that expressing affection for your fellow sailors is an act of courage, a demonstration of honor, and a testament to your commitment to the mission.
That's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah.
It flips the script on like the traditional view of masculinity in the military.
Right.
Where vulnerability is often seen as a weakness.
Right. And this isn't just about romantic relationships either. It's about expressing affection in all types of relationships.
Gotcha.
From friendships to professional collaborations.
So it sounds like they're really trying to cultivate a culture of mutual respect and care.
Exactly. And that brings us to another crucial element of the program. Boundaries.
Boundaries. How does that fit into the bigger picture?
Well, the guidebook emphasizes that setting healthy boundaries is essential for any relationship, whether it's personal or professional. Boundaries help to define your limits, protect your well-being, and ensure that you're able to show up as your best self in all aspects of your life.
So what are some of the key principles of setting boundaries that the program emphasizes?
They talk a lot about clear communication, being able to articulate your needs and limits in a direct and assertive way without being aggressive or passive.
So it's about being upfront about what you're comfortable with and what you're not.
Exactly. They also talk about the importance of consistency. Once you've set a boundary, sticking to it reinforces that boundary and builds trust in the relationship.
It seems like this could be especially challenging in the Navy, where there's such a strong emphasis on following orders, conforming to the group.
You're right. It's definitely not always easy. But the program acknowledges that setting boundaries isn't about being selfish or disobeying orders. It's about taking care of yourself so that you can be a more effective member of the team.
So it's recognizing that your needs and well-being are important too, and that setting boundaries actually contributes to a healthier and more functional work environment.
Exactly. And when everyone feels safe and respected, it creates a more cohesive and productive unit overall.
So far, this program seems like a really comprehensive approach to building healthier relationships. Is there anything else that they focus on?
Well, one of the most unique aspects of the program, and perhaps the most ambitious, is their emphasis on relationship planning.
Relationship planning.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that before.
It's essentially about taking a proactive approach to building strong and healthy relationships rather than waiting for problems to arise. The program encourages sailors to consciously map out their relationships, setting goals, defining expectations, planning for potential challenges.
So it's like creating a roadmap for your relationship from the very beginning.
Exactly. And they actually provide a step-by-step guide in the document.
Oh, wow.
To help sailors do just that.
Okay.
It's quite detailed.
Walk me through it. What are some of the key steps?
Well, the first step is setting intentions.
Okay.
This is about having open and honest conversations with your partner, whether it's a romantic partner, a friend, or even a colleague.
Right.
About your hopes and dreams and your vision for the relationship.
It's about getting on the same page from the get-go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then the next step is defining goals.
Okay.
What do you want to achieve together?
Okay.
What are your short-term and long-term objectives for the relationship?
So you're not just drifting along, you're actually steering the ship together.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And then you move on to mapping out communication strategies.
Okay.
How will you communicate effectively? How will you handle disagreements?
Right.
How will you ensure that both partners feel heard and understood?
So it's about being proactive and intentional about how you communicate.
Exactly.
Rather than just reacting in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the importance of cultivating mutual respect.
Right.
Creating an environment where both partners feel valued, appreciated, respected for who they are.
It sounds like they're really laying the groundwork for a strong and healthy relationship.
They are. And then a crucial step is practicing empathy.
Okay.
Putting yourself in your partner's shoes.
Yeah.
Seeing things from their perspective.
Empathy is so important for building understanding, resolving conflict constructively.
Absolutely. And then finally, there's the commitment to growth.
Okay.
Recognizing that relationships are not static.
Right.
They're constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And both partners need to be committed to nurturing that growth.
So it's not a one and done thing.
Right.
It's about continuously working on the relationship.
Yeah.
And adapting to change.
Exactly. It's about working together, supporting each other, and making the relationship a priority.
It's interesting how they tie all of this back to the Navy's overall mission.
Right.
It's not just saying, hey, strong relationships are good for you personally.
Right.
They're arguing that strong relationships are essential for a strong Navy.
You're absolutely right. They make a very clear connection between individual well-being and collective success.
Yeah.
They argue that when sailors have strong relationships and feel supported and respected, they're more likely to be engaged, motivated, and resilient, which ultimately leads to a more effective and cohesive fighting force.
That's a pretty powerful argument, and it's not just theoretical.
Right.
They're actually putting this into practice through policy changes, training programs, leadership initiatives.
Exactly. We'll dive into the specifics of implementation in the next part.
Okay.
But it's clear that the Navy is taking this very seriously.
Yeah.
They're really committed to making this cultural shift happen.
We've been exploring the Navy's relationship literacy program, and it seems like a pretty radical approach.
Yeah.
To strengthening the force from the inside out.
It really is.
We've talked about emotional intelligence, stress management, setting boundaries, all these crucial elements for building those healthy relationships.
Right, but how do they actually put these ideas into action?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about too.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have a great plan,
right,
but execution is everything.
It is.
And for what I've seen in this document, they're not just paying lip service to this, they're actually taking concrete steps to make it happen.
Exactly. It's not just a few workshops or a chapter in a training manual.
Yeah.
They're really weaving these principles into the fabric of the Navy's operations.
So one of the key strategies they outline is policy alignment.
Yes.
What does that actually look like?
So it's about embedding these values of respect, accountability, healthy relationships into the Navy's rules and regulations.
So it's not just about saying, hey, be nice to each other.
Right.
It's about actually creating a system where those values are reinforced.
Exactly.
At every level.
At every level, yeah.
So for example, how might this impact disciplinary actions?
Okay, imagine a scenario where there's a conflict between two sailors.
Okay.
Instead of just focusing on punishment, the disciplinary process might also involve mediation or conflict resolution training.
Okay.
Emphasizing the importance of communication.
Gotcha.
And understanding.
It's about addressing the root causes of the conflict.
Right, exactly.
Not just the symptoms.
Right.
That's pretty different than what you might expect.
Yeah.
From a military setting.
It is, it's a shift.
And it goes beyond just disciplinary action.
Right. It could influence everything.
Yeah.
From how leaders are selected and promoted to how teams are formed.
Okay.
And managed.
It's about creating a culture where those healthy relationship skills are valued and rewarded.
Absolutely.
Speaking of leadership, the document really emphasizes the role of leaders in driving this cultural shift.
Yeah, leaders at all levels are expected to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk.
They have to be the example.
They need to be role models, embodying those principles of the program, creating an environment where those values can flourish.
Yeah, it's hard to take it seriously if your commanding officer isn't on board.
Exactly. It's about setting the tone from the top down.
Yeah.
The guidebook even includes specific guidelines for leaders on how to foster open communication, encourage respectful interactions, and address conflict constructively within their teams.
So leadership training is a key piece of the puzzle here.
It's a huge part of it. And it's not just about one-off workshops. They're looking at integrating relationship literacy training into all sorts of programs throughout a sailor's career.
Wow. So like from basic training
all the way up to officer development courses.
So it's like this continuous reinforcement and development of these skills.
Making sure those skills are constantly being honed and applied.
Right. And they're not just relying on traditional classroom style training.
No, they're exploring a variety of formats. From interactive workshops to online modules, even peer-to-peer mentoring programs.
It's about meeting sailors where they are.
Exactly.
Providing that support and resources to build those skills in a way that makes sense for them.
In a way that works,
And this isn't just about romantic relationships, right?
No, not a...
We've touched on this before.
The program addresses all kinds of relationships. Family, friends, professional interactions.
It's recognizing that all of these relationships contribute to a sailor's well-being.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, to the effectiveness of the Navy.
Exactly.
It's a holistic approach.
It is.
Looking at the whole person.
The whole person,
Not just their role as a sailor. One thing I was really impressed by with this program was their commitment to continuous evaluation.
That's so important.
They're not just assuming this is going to work perfectly right out of the gate. They're taking a data-driven approach, gathering feedback from sailors at all levels, analyzing those results. Making adjustments as needed.
Being flexible, recognizing that change is an ongoing process.
They're not just checking boxes.
No.
They're genuinely invested in making sure this program has a real impact.
They want to see that impact.
They're looking at both short-term and long-term outcomes, trying to measure things like changes in behavior, improvements in communication, even reductions in disciplinary actions.
Tangible evidence that this program is making a difference.
It's a bold experiment for sure.
It is.
But one that I think could have ripple effects far beyond the Navy.
I agree.
If they can create a culture of healthy relationships within such a large, complex organization, it could be a model for others.
Absolutely. It's exciting to think about the potential.
What is businesses, schools, entire communities adopted a similar approach?
It could be transformative.
It really makes you think. It all boils down to investing in relationships, equipping people with the skills to navigate conflict, communicate effectively, build strong connections. I mean, those are investments that pay off.
For sure.
Not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
Exactly.
Food for thought, listener. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.